Hello, my name's Duncan Robertson. I'm one of the freelance gallery educators that helps deliver on the Gallery Social programme for the National Gallery of Scotland. And today, this is the second video we're going to look at, and it's making a little artwork inspired by Robert Burns' The Hunt, the artwork we looked at earlier on. Here's one I made earlier, a little card made just from things I found round about the kitchen here in my flat, and made a little collage image inspired by Robert Burns' The Hunt. So if you'd like to get yourself a nice cup of tea and maybe some biscuits, and keep the wrappers because they're very useful for this workshop we're going to do today. So the first section we're going to do for this image is the background, and then Robert Burns' The Hunt panel, he's gilded it with lovely gilder's gold in the background. You can beat gold very thin to some very thin sheets, and here's some gold here. And then he's used that as a background. I'm not expecting to go out and get gold, but I'd like to show you is how gilders move gold around. You simply get some static electricity on a brush, and then you can pick up the gold and carry it around like magic, just with the electricity of static electricity that you've made from your own skin. Isn't that wonderful? And then you put it down with size on the background, and then artists can work on top of that. Very famously, Gustav Klimt used gold in his work, and icon paintings but we're going to use something much more readily available. We're going to use silver and gold foil wrappers that you can save from your sweeties or your Easter eggs or whatever silver paper you've got around. Even the silver foil, the kitchen foil, that's very useful. It's a bit brittle, but it can be used as well for the background of this image if you don't have any 3D wrappers. I'll leave that up to yourself. And in the image made before, you can see the background. I've used all the sweetie wrappers to make the background and built the image up and top on layers. These kind of represent the vines that are in Robert Burns's image, and this figure in the horse I found in a magazine, and I put that on. I've stuck some animals round about. So I've made this into a card, actually. I always think it's very handy to have birthday cards ready, or greeting cards ready for people. Very handy, and people do much appreciate getting one that are handmade rather than bought in a shop. So it's a way of recycling and saving money at the same time. So if you'd like to get a piece of card, for demonstration purposes, I'm using this quite large card, but you can make it much smaller, half the size or whatever size, or you can just put it on a piece of paper. It doesn't have to be card. But really, just find what you're lying around the house. You don't have to go out and find anything special. And stick down some of our sweetie papers onto the card until we get a nice gold background. I've covered one here, you can see, with the sweetie wrappers. That's used the wrappers to contain the biscuits as well for quickness, and just stuck that down. So we have a nice glistening gold background. Don't worry too much about the writing just now, because we're going to cover that up later. So I've used that as the foundation for my artwork on the start of it. And the next section is to find an image that you like from a magazine. I've got old magazines that I've collected here in a little box that I kind of recycling, really, and I keep them particularly for this purpose. I like going to auctions. I've got old auction catalogues that sometimes I can pick up from them. And these got wonderful images in them, very nice, beautiful bits and pieces. So if you have a look round through those and find maybe a big centre image, a figure or some animals, And sometimes it's good not to think too much when you're doing this and just cut out some. What I like to do is cut out some images and put them into little baskets. So I have a little posse of images that I found in magazines and lying around, images to work with before I put them down on the artwork. And then I like to find one big image, sort of central. I found this image of a sculpture. It's actually by Ernest Barlach, German sculptor. And I've cut that out to be my central figure. So I'm going to place that somewhere in front and just place things loosely round about. I found these lion-like figures and just like laying them on the surface of the picture till I find. I've got this lion. This is very appropriate for the hunt. Maybe I'll put the lion up in the air like that. And just playing around with some images until I have my composition fairly worked out. Just playing around, leaving it very loose in the beginning of the artwork so I can play around with it. The next stage is making my vines. And my vines I've made from using card that I just found lying around in. I haven't went out and especially buy coloured card to get sort of like those green bits of paper. And your recycling box is a good place to look for these things. You might find exciting and interesting pieces. So I found sides of this card here, which I've cut out into vine-like shapes, and simply when I'm cutting them out, I simply actually just went for just a sort of vine-like S shape, sort of like kind of inspired by Robert Burns' The Hunt. And I start thicker at one side and constantly think about getting thinner and thinner and thinner at the top, so you have that growing feeling. And actually, to get most out of the vines, I've turned it round the piece of paper the other way around, and then I'm doing the opposite round, going from the thin end up to the thinner end and playing around, and then putting these. I quite like putting bits of paper into boxes so that I have little bits next to me to work with. And then I'm just laying these down on the picture and making the picture up slowly as I go through to get that feeling of lushness, of movement going through the picture. I'm just leaving things quite loose just now, playing around so I can experiment and play with the image and see what happens with the images. Sometimes things are too much, so I take them off again, put them on. Maybe this is too big, I'm just going to rip this down and make it smaller. Maybe I just need one head rather than both of these figures. Playing around like that, and simply playing around until I find some idea of the composition I want to work with. Really sort of experimenting and floating around the bits of paper. What I quite like doing is these are one of my favourite, I'm sure you'll recognise them. These are one of my favourite sweeties, and they make quite good halos if you put the two images together. So if like you find an object you quite like, maybe it's worth playing around your background and putting one of these down. I like the way they radiate out from the central image. Might have one there, might have a round one there, right in the center of image. So you can play with the background now as well. Now we're really composing our picture and thinking about elements of the picture. So just play around for a little bit with your composition. Now I've got my image fairly well laid out, how I like it. I've got sort of the background, very lustre colours in the background with my gold papers. And I've got some animals, a centre figure very dynamically moving across the picture. And I've got these vines on the image as well going up. So now we have to glue it down with our glue stick. And a tip for this is You might want to pause to do this, but a tip first of all is to go through working backwards. So I'm going to take off my vines first and lay them at one side. So when we're gluing things down, we start with sort of like backwards, forwards. And I try and be consistent myself, which is easier said than done, is to take away from this side backwards, and then I can lay the layers up. So I'm going to take my goat-like figure away, my main figure, my panther jumping out there, Lion and his lovely crown. I'm going to start first of all with the background piece for the crown of the lion here. Another tip is to go right to the edges of the paper. Go right to the edges of the paper. You might want to do this away from the paper on a bit. I'm doing it for demonstration purposes here. And glue down. So this is going to be where I have that wonderful image of the monkey at the top there, of the lion, I should say. And here's the line I'm going to take. Right, the important thing is really to get the edges of the paper done. Sometimes it's useful to use a place that you know is going to be covered up and it's not going to be seen anymore, and you can stick that down there. So this is the first part of my image. And this is where it gets useful for doing one part going backwards, going across, because it's quite hard to remember where everything is. And you have to sort of play around a little bit with things as well. It's always, I always think there's happy accidents happen when you're making artwork. When you're making things, you might not intend it to be exactly that way, but somehow things come together quite often with the artwork. So you might like to pause the video and carry on through this stage until you get your main things down on the paper. Now this section, I've got my image more or less ready. The one thing is missing to tie it all together is leaves. A tip for the leaves, I think it's better to leave it to this stage, it's a little bit trickety, but there's sweetie papers, green ones, and if you get a little container to hold them in, I've got a container here to hold them in, and to make the leaf shapes, a tip is to fold your paper into triangle, so like fold it over once and then into itself, and then you've got these folds, and then you can just, all you do is cut half a piece of paper. So for once you've cut out sweetie paper into a little half shapes, into little leaf shapes, I like to have quite a little supply of them, and then you can get the leaves and you can lay them round the image, decorating the image with gold or silver leaves, whatever you like, and just dot them around the image where you feel you'd like to be. There is no rights and wrongs in art. That's something one of my art teachers once said a long, long time ago. And I always remember it every day, that whatever you do, there's no rights and wrongs in doing things, just whatever you really want to do, what you feel like doing. And just decorating the image a little bit to give a sort of jungle feeling, bit of a like movement in the image, and using these nice green bits of paper and foil to decorate the image round it and going round there. So once you've got a few on like that, and a tip for gluing these is, because they're quite delicate, is actually I bring the leaf to the glue stick and I lay the leaf on top of the glue stick and get it to go to the edge that way. Because they're quite fiddly, this little bit at the end. It's sort of like getting all the leaves to go down around and put them on. So I do them individually. Once I've got a rough idea where they're all going to be, and stick them down one by one in the images. Well, now I've got my image more or less finished. I've got all my bits stuck down onto the paper, and I hope you agree that I think anyone would like to get this for a birthday card or a thing for celebration. It's very glittery, and all we've done is reused recycled materials that we found in the kitchen here. We've made our artwork inspired by Robert Burns' The Hunt, with the idea of thick vegetation and the figures going through the vegetation, some animals hidden in the background, just very loosely based on the artwork. But I hope you've enjoyed this very quick, simple demonstration. And yes, I hope to see you back in the gallery sometime soon. And thank you for watching. Keep well.